I am quite a chatty person. That much is obvious to anyone who's ever spoken to me, probably obvious to you guys on my channel. I like to have a conversation, I like to get involved, I like to engage, I love meeting new people, I like making friends, I'm just quite outgoing. I also really like immersive theatre. The Great Gatsby were on show 18, 19 tonight, and Neverland, which was fantastic. I saw that 8 times, it was great. There is a new immersive show in town now though, in the exact same building as Gatsby. You can hear me like getting really excited. In exactly the same building as Gatsby, there is a show downstairs called For King and Country. Now, this is a show where the premise is it is World War II and select members of Parliament and their family members are taken to this bunker to keep them safe during the war, and because there is a war going on, it is essentially up to you guys to make important decisions about the strategies within the war and things that are happening in London, so like evacuating people and the use of chemical weapons and such like that. And essentially the decisions you make and the actions you do throughout the night can decide whether you win the war or lose the war. And I saw it yesterday on opening night for the first time in my entire life. I was speechless for nearly the entire event. That has never happened before. I was fine until we got down into the bunker, because you start off in this room just when everyone's arriving and then you get taken downstairs into the bunker. And as soon as I stepped through the door, a lump formed in my throat and I could not speak until they're near enough. The reason for that is because I have family connections to World War II, and I've heard stories about World War II and I've studied it so much in history at school, and it was one of my favourite time periods of history, the other one obviously being the 1920s, and I have such strong emotional bonds to World War II that when I saw the bunker and what they'd done to it, I was absolutely emotionally overwhelmed. I had no words. Every single thing in that room, every tiny detail, it's all been accounted for, and you don't need to suspend your disbelief because you really do feel like you're in a bunker in 1940s fighting World War II. It was so surreal and I just could not speak because I thought I was going to just burst into tears and start sobbing because it was so realistic. And it wasn't like I was upset, it was just surreal to actually feel like you're actually there. But the really good thing about that is I got to be a little bit of a fly on the wall, as one of the cast members put it yesterday, and the really good thing about that is you can see how the characters are interacting with the audience members, how the audience members are interacting with the characters. So when a character isn't actually performing, so to speak, when they're off in another part of the room, are they still staying in character or do they break character? I noticed not once did they break character. Even if no one is looking at them, they are flawless. They remain in character the whole time. They're completely focused on the job at hand. Their dedication is fantastic. So the way that the show works is actually very clever. I won't say too much because, as I found out yesterday, if I say anything, I will spoil the whole thing for you. Just please go and see it. But as I found out yesterday, the way that it works is you kind of are... This is quite a lot more immersive than Gatsby, I'd say, because you elect a prime minister and you elect a war minister and a foreign secretary and a propaganda minister and everything. It's all completely down to the audience, how everything goes, who gets to do what jobs, how those jobs pan out, what decisions are made. There is very, very little left to the cast members to organise. The audience basically does the entire thing. I think all the cast members really do is help you move the story along, so you're not really focused on the same thing for too long. And it's so clever how it's all been done. And the room is split up into different sections, so you've got the foreign secretary in that corner, you've got the propaganda minister in that corner, you've got the war minister in that corner, you've got a BBC broadcast room. It's just so clever. What I love about this show is I went to this show being like, well, no matter what happens, what decisions you make, I'm sure it will have the same outcome. After watching it yesterday, I can think of like 1,000,001 outcomes that you can have. It will never be the same outcome no matter how many times you go, because the outcome depends on the decisions you make. Because I thought whatever decisions are made, it will end up the same. That is not how it works. I can't tell you why. Go and see it and you'll find out. And one thing that I found really clever is you don't realise until the end how the entire show is tied together, and it's done really neatly and really nicely in a way that's really concise and it makes sense and it fits perfectly with the time period. Everything is just so well thought out, and you can see the amount of research and work and effort that's gone into this show, and it really pays off. And the costumes, oh my goodness, the costumes. I need to take a minute, I'm getting emotional again. I have no words. Okay, right. I didn't realise this until I spoke to the cast members at the end. About halfway through the show, I noticed one of the costumes that one of the cast members was wearing, and I thought, that's really realistic. Like, that's eerily realistic. How on earth did they get hold of that? I spoke to someone at the end. They said to me that they are authentic, real costumes, real uniforms, sorry, from World War II. How amazing is it that in a World War II based show, real World War II uniforms are being worn? I think that's just fantastic, absolutely phenomenal. And this is what I mean by attention to detail. They've paid attention to absolutely every detail possible. There is nothing that I could see that was not accounted for. Okay, so this is a weird bit that I need to edit in that I haven't filmed because I've just put my tripod away and I don't want to get it all out again. But one thing I forgot to mention about For King and Country is when you get there, people will get given one of these. This is a national registration identity card that you're asked to fill out. And I didn't write my full address because I'm not going to actually write my address down, but you're asked to write your name and your address, and on the back of it, it tells you your role within the show. So I was an MP for Swansea East for Labour, and that's what I'm talking about, attention to detail. Like, the immersion is so real from the second you step through the door to the second you leave. It is phenomenal. Like, to go to the effort of actually printing an identity card so similar to the ones they would have actually had in those days is fantastic. I can't praise this show highly enough. Go see it. One little thing that I noticed, I don't know if everyone else did, is the music is that of Glenn Miller and Vera Lynn and all those typical voices and musicians and artists of 1940s. But as the night progresses and the story gets a lot more intense, the music goes off and the sound of bombs and the Blitz and air raids and such, they come in really quite quietly to start until it builds up and builds up and builds up until near the end you can't ignore the sound of like bombs falling on your head. And it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying because it's so real. And it's all very well for us because it's 2018, it's not real, we're fine, there's not actually bombs falling on our head. But if you put yourself into the shoes of those in the Blitz in the 1940s, that was actually what they were hearing. That must have been absolutely terrifying, and I can't even begin to imagine how they must have felt. The way I felt last night probably wasn't even close to how they felt during the actual time, but I think it's just fantastic that they've been able to recreate that atmosphere in a theatre essentially. The show is very intense, I will say that. The show starts off quite light-hearted, not too heavy, it's alright, you can have a bit of a joke here and there, but as the show progresses, the intensity builds and builds and builds until the end. At the end, I was shaking where it was so intense. Like, it was a brilliant thing to experience because you're putting yourself in the shoes of what people would have actually done and been going through in 1940s, but it was just very, very realistic and intense, and I'm speechless again. It was a very surreal experience. The show is booking currently for 2 months, but I think this should definitely extend longer. I do think that. I say that about Gatsby, I know, but this one I actually genuinely needed to extend because it's such a clever way to get people to experience history. I thought I knew history. I had studied World War II, I had stories, I had family connections, blah blah blah. But then when I went to the show and I started experiencing it, I realised I didn't know it that well at all. It's what I knew was kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, and decisions you thought were black and white are definitely not black and white until you put yourselves in the shoes and position of what those people went through in 1940s, like I did last night. You have to sit there and think about these decisions that were actually being made that affect real people. These are real people's lives you're thinking about. There are decisions here being made that are really, really quite difficult. Like, it's not black and white. It's so difficult to imagine what they would have done. You've got the whole pressure of like, this is history right here. Like, World War II was making history. So essentially, what happens in that room could change the course of history. And I think for this show, you really need to be 100% committed. You can't go down there and be like, well, it's 2018, it doesn't matter what I say. World War II is finished, why do I matter? You've got to believe you are in 1940s. You've got to believe you are taking a part in World War II. You've got to believe that what you're doing will have an impact. If you don't have that commitment, it's not going to work at all. And luckily, I was fully committed when I went down there because I've done immersive shows before. I knew you had to be committed. It didn't take a lot for me to bend my disbelief because of the characters and the costumes and the setting and every little thing made it so realistic that I could just forget I was in 2018 just like that. I literally woke up this morning after For King Country. For King Country was last night. I literally woke up this morning and the show was so good I actually thought it was a dream. Last night just feels surreal because it was that good. It was fantastic. I beg you to please go and see it. This show is perfect for children studying history at GCSE or at A level. It's a really interactive way to get them to put themselves in the shoes of people within history. It's a really good way for them to understand important events and important decisions they've only learnt about. It's a really good way to just get children involved. I urge everyone everywhere to go and see this. This show is just fantastic. The really handy thing about this show is it's in the same building as Gatsby. It's literally right next door to Gatsby. I want show 18 to be 19 tonight of Gatsby, so I can just switch between the two. Gatsby one night for King and Country the next night, and then they can catch up with Gatsby. I can just see my bank crying now. If you hear wailing, that is my bank crying as I type in my card details. I think that's everything I've had to say, but at the same time I don't think that's everything I've had to say. If I think of anything else, I'll just do a full King and Country part 2. Just gives me an excuse to talk about it some more, because this is a show I could talk about forever and ever and ever. I feel so sorry for the cast members yesterday. They must have thought, first of all, they must have thought I was being really rude because I couldn't speak because of the lump in my throat. I did try to apologise. If for some reason you are watching this, I was not deliberately not saying anything. I could not speak because of the lump in my throat, but it means you guys did a really good job, so huge well done and thank you so much. I will be back. But they also must have thought that I was really annoying because after the show I just did nothing but speak to the cast members about the show they'd just done. Like, yes Layla, they know all of this, they've just performed it, they don't need you reiterating that. One day I'll get good at this. One day. Okay, I'm going to leave it there before I jabber on anymore. Thank you for watching and bye!